that I think I'm a good therapist, and the space made me a great therapist. The amount of people that would comment like, I just love being here. I already feel better as soon as I walk in the door.
Hearing about the physical environment you're in and realizing that that can have an emotional impact, a really physiological impact on how you feel and your wellness.
You are creating an experience, whether it's intentional or not. So is it the right one?
It's the clinicians that are creating the success of these practices, right? And we really want to create inspiring places for these like caregivers to continuously give to their clients.
In the landscape of like AI doom and gloom, we are in a human connection business.
Welcome back to the Othello's Taking Back Healthcare podcast. Today we are joined by Macpherson and Neena Folliott. Thank you for being here today.
Our pleasure.
So what you folks do is actually quite unique. So I'm going to leave it to you to kind of share your background and how you got here today and how you started Articulate Design and Consulting.
It is wild to say it has been almost 6 years that we've been in business together. And it's important to note, Neena and I are both PTs by schooling, by trade, and we've worked in the physical therapy industry for a number of years. I won't say how many, it will age us too quickly. And we had this mutual connection lamenting about how poorly our industry considered the environment in which we work in and in which we treat. And, you know, we'd grumble about it, we'd chat about it, and we have a lot of experience in design in our personal lives. So this was an ongoing conversation for us. And then I opened my own practice a number of years ago, and design was really the pillar of how I conceptualized the business. And anecdotally, it was really interesting to see that come to life in the sense that I think I'm a good therapist, and the space made me a great therapist. The amount of people that would comment like, I just love being here. I already feel better as soon as I walk in the door. And it really confirmed this growing seed that we had been developing of the environment is so important. And every other industry seems to have understood this. And the industry that should consider this the most, the one in which we are trying to inspire health and well-being, and when people are at their worst and we want to make them feel their best, and yet they're coming into often environments that are quite the opposite. And so we just decided that we were going to do something about this. We had a colleague who took a chance on us, had us design their clinic, and what we thought may be an interesting side hustle has now led us to designing clinics all over the world.
That's incredible.
And that is where this all began.
Right. And you said 6 years ago, which sounds like it was a quarantine COVID, like, listen, we got to change something. Is that right?
It was a time where I think a lot of us had a little bit more space to just reflect overall. Meg and I are both very creative people, and I think that I know personally I was really looking for a creative outlet. While I love being a sports physical therapist, that's a really different side of the brain. So yeah, I think like COVID gave us time and space to explore this a little bit more. And it was a time where this idea of like feeling or experiencing wellness seemed so much more critical, right? When you were forced to go into an in-person setting, it felt very scary. Signage everywhere. Don't touch this. Don't take off your mask ever. And it just became that much more visceral for us that a change needed to happen in the industry.
Right. I feel like a lot of places I've been to, they just feel very sterile. You know, the corporate millennial gray type of vibe.
Right.
Right. Yeah. So you said it started out as a side hustle, and obviously now it's like a full-blown business. What was the first entry point?
So that was a classmate of Meg's, and I think it was more of a, do you have any advice for me? You're really into design. And we just threw our hats in the ring and we're like, we do this. We can do this for you. And we kind of were just both problem solvers. And I think that comes from our physical therapy background. And we literally just designed that space top to bottom. And really, after that project, we realized we are also just consultants in practice, because you cannot ignore the systems that need to exist in a space without marrying that to the physical design of the space, right? So the floor plan, for instance, like that is a living thing that you move through in 3D. And so we realized that we were asking a lot of questions that were unexpected from our clients. And that's where we realized, like, oh, this is an industry changing concept that we want to see. But that was the first jumping point. People took a chance on us. We designed it, and it just got a lot of traction in the industry. And physical therapy is a tight knit community, I would say, where the city that we're in, and it just kind of word of mouth took off from there.
Interesting. I something I've heard several times now as we've been, chatting with folks is locally, as you're saying that it's like kind of like a small community, there's a lot of competition between clinics and it's like a rotating door. So I'd imagine, oh, I hear at, Meg's clinic, they just like redid everything. Now I have to, in order to like stay competitive because people are naturally going to want to go there. The vibe is better. I'm just curious about how kind of like the organicness of the growth of your consulting business has been.
Yeah, I mean, I think increasingly so people are understanding design is a competitive advantage. And that is using the word design in the way people traditionally think about it, which is aesthetics. But what we try to really counter with is yes, aesthetics is definitely part of what we do, but we're talking about design from a fundamental place of optimizing a business. And you're not getting that going to a commercial designer, a residential designer, or a friend who's good with picking colors. It's about understanding the brand ethos, the brand personality, and then marrying that with the intentions or the business plan and creating a space that is a reflection of those things. And so, yes, there's people who come to us, are like, I need a nice clinic. Buddy down the street has a nice clinic and I need to compete. But increasingly so, I think there's more depth to it of people understanding that the design of the space is maybe one of the best investments in the success of their business, as much as they would have traditionally seen, other components.
Right. So what is the typical process? Like you come in, you meet with the folks, you get an understanding of the floor plan, their brand. What else are we kind of diagnosing and looking into?
So, yes, we kind of actually formulated our version of like a physical therapy intake form, but based on design. And so we gather all of this information, and I think our clients are initially like really surprised by some of the questions we ask, because we ask about their systems, we ask about details about like their business, their growth plan, lots of things that you wouldn't expect a typical designer to ask. And that comes from our clinician background. We really want to understand the various systems that they have in place, and we take a good audit of that. And so that's where the process starts. We get a really deep understanding of the physical space, the systems, their goals, and then we start to put that into more of the brand context. So that's a really huge starting point for us. We want to work with clients who are extremely confident in their brand, and we talk about brand as more of like an entity than just, a logo and a font and some colors. But to us, brand is a personality, like you said, like a vibe. I want to go to a place that just has a better vibe. So that vibe is also really specific though, right? Like it's attracting a certain kind of clinician to work in your space. It's attracting a certain kind of clientele that you want to service. So that brand needs to be really well conceptualized. And those are kind of the first starting points. And then we start to produce some visuals. So we start working on floor planning. And that is really like a living workflow, right? To understand pinch points in the space. And then we create some visual concepts, and that's kind of where things start.
Got it. Got it. And so, you know, you two started out as physiotherapists yourselves. How did you make sure to kind of impart these while you were still practicing?
I actually think that was the competitive advantage we had, is that in being practicing business owners, clinicians, is we understand a level of nuance to clinic design that is incredibly important, and I think it's a missing link. Most people are setting up clinics that are just the status quo. It's like what's always been done. I mean, I think we can all close our eyes and visualize walking into a physical therapy clinic in its traditional sense. There's a big front desk, they have their logo behind it, probably, the wall is painted in their brand color. There's a bunch of medical chairs lined up. You walk down a hallway with some rooms, and then there's a gym with, like, equipment scattered everywhere, and I don't mean that to be, like, to diminish our profession, but I think it's the image most of us can conjure up
Yeah.
when we think of it, and what we're trying to do is create a paradigm shift of no longer is this the clinic of the future. No longer is this the clinic of the present. Um, it it's about looking to, like, other industries that have enveloped this and have been successful with it. Think of going to a restaurant. You've already decided if you like that food often before you've tasted it because of the music that's playing, because of the decor, because of how seamless it was to, make a reservation and be seated. There's an experience that is driving this, and we're trying to really push that of we're not service, we're not delivering a service, we're delivering an experience. And that is really what's catching fire because I think we can no longer deny it. It's not about word of mouth and, this is like a nice to have. It's a need to have. This is just where the economy is going.
In having that experience yourself, what was a specific thing that you saw really, really worked when you were still practicing?
I think really understanding like zoning, creating like zones in a space and understanding what are like the fundamental offerings that your clinic has and how to kind of delineate zones for that. I think that was really valuable. I worked in like so many different practice settings where it's like everything's all over the place, even like places where it's like a satellite clinic set up for a month and then it's getting torn down. And that actually, I think, helped me a lot in my idea of how a practice should be because it's like, okay, we're in here for a month. I know exactly what I need and how I need to operate and what needs to be at arm's reach, what needs to be put away, what gives the space a feeling of, clarity. I think that that was like very helpful for me personally in terms of knowing what was a fundamental part of design.
Yeah. I also think it's just timing too. Like we came into doing this when the industry was under a crazy inflection point with the technology that came into place. So when I started my practice was right at the cusp of when you didn't need to have an admin anymore. People could book online. People could, pay virtually. I didn't need an admin staff to get started. The barrier to entry was really, really seamless if you utilize the available technology appropriately. And that's just been a resonating theme as we've evolved as a design firm and as we've worked with bigger and bigger clients is, are you utilizing what's available to you?
So with, talking to physical therapy practices about what you folks do, how do you convince them that this is a need and not just a nice to have?
I think like having conversations like this obviously is very helpful. We're so passionate about this. So talking about this, I think is really helpful, but I think kind of the proof is in the pudding. So it's like after doing so many different clinics in so many different places with different populations and seeing the outcomes of that, not just being, frivolous, but seeing actual growth, seeing retention of clinicians, really taking a clinician-centered approach where, that's feedback we get a lot from our clients is like, we want to attract really good clinicians who vibe with our ethos, and then we want to keep them. And so actually seeing that come into fruition after we've designed a space, I think that is really meaningful when people see those outcomes. I think that that is really what brings them to our door. And obviously our work is so visual. So we really just used Instagram at first just to show what's possible. It's so different. And if you look at our portfolio, every space we've designed is very different because we really are just trying to create a physical expression of that unique brand. So Instagram was kind of a really big place for us at first, and then word of mouth that it was like, "Oh, these are clinicians. These are our colleagues who are designing spaces." There's this inherent trust there, I think, too, that we speak the same language, we understand their background, we understand how hard they've worked to come to where they're at. So that's kind of how we started, but I think now, we we've really leaned into the consulting role, that we also play because that's really where those more tangible growth parameters lie, I think. And so now, we love coming to big conferences, and LinkedIn is a great like platform for us as well to kind of start making, I think, bigger waves by interacting with bigger groups.
Yeah, and I think we take the approach that you really have to be ready for this in the sense that we're working with the innovators in the industry. Like, this isn't for everybody yet. I believe it will be. I believe it's inevitable that people are going to see that design is such a low-hanging fruit to really elevate the the practice and efficiencies within it. But I think what attracts people to us is the ones who are on the front end of that curve and saying like, "I know that we can do better. I see it all around me. How can you help?"
Right. I'm curious about how you folks measure success. I mean, you mentioned there's this, big kind of, intake form that you're doing ahead of time. Are you using that to also potentially like benchmark where they started at and after, let's say 3, 6 months, seeing how maybe some of those benchmarks are improving?
Yeah, I mean, that's something that we're spending more time in getting some hard data around that. But the soft data or kind of the more anecdotal data is is apparent really quickly. And what that looks like um is efficiencies in like room turnover, in admin burden, in clinician satisfaction, in just having like an Instagrammable space, if that even makes sense. Like, we're in a very visual world. So people just feeling proud of where they work or where they're visiting and creating like much more of a brand presence, all of that. And I think because our industry, again, I painted this picture of like what we all visualize as a prototypical kind of rehab clinic or medical center. The bar is fairly low that people are really impressed with putting not much into it. And you know, we make this joke sometimes is that when we're designing a space, it's not in a way to be elitist. If anything, it's the opposite. It's understanding as clinicians ourselves, like, design is a vehicle to elevate our profession. And whether you design a space really intentionally or you don't, often the cost is not that dramatically different, but the upside is. And so, that starts to make it very tangible for prospective clients.
Right. I'm curious about any particular like things you've heard from patients or providers that made you go like we really transformed not only this space but just their day-to-day life.
Yeah, I can tell you about one we worked with. They have they're a huge clinic network, and we did a pilot project with them on one clinic that's a really it's a really effective clinic in that it's high volume. They see a lot of patients. They've got staff that they've had for a long time, but the clinics was really outdated. I mean, it probably last seen a paintbrush 30 years ago. Big clunky front desk, filing cabinets that no longer housed paper charts, just stuff. Big photocopier that was rarely used. It was a great example of like the tech and the systems had come up to speed with where we're at, but the space didn't reflect that. And so we were tasked with we can't expand the space. We're stuck with this square footage, but what can we do to optimize? And so, it was streamlining the front desk. It was using wayfinding and lighting in a way where we completely changed the whole classic waiting room setup. They didn't need 20 chairs at the front because people could go to their treatment areas. We streamlined zones, as Nina spoke about earlier, so that we were able to go from 9 treatment areas to 16 without changing the square footage. We optimized the gym, took out clunky big equipment with more streamlined equipment so that they could offer more programming in that space. Um, every single aspect was audited to integrate with the systems they were using and to update it to a more relevant setting. And so it's a very, very tangible example of we did nothing to the square footage, but by updating it, thinking of their systems, we could unlock so much revenue
Right.
generation for them.
Right. That's incredible. 9 to 16
9 to
is
16, no change in square footage. Um, it is. And if anything, we created more room, more space for their staff and clinicians. This wasn't sacrificing a staff room. None of that. We kept those amenities that are super important to keep. But it's just finding space because we it was operating the way a clinic should operate 30 years ago. So there's thousands of clinics in that same boat. And when you're in that bubble, when you're working in it daily or when you're overseeing it daily, you can't visualize anything different. You know it can be updated, you can probably see a few things, but it's incredible the transformation that can happen.
I'm curious if there's a design element that you folks see is typically undervalued. For example, I had a friend come to my apartment recently and she said, "You gotta get rid of the overhead light, do accent lighting," and it completely
We love
changed the
her.
vibe of my
Yeah. Yeah. I think, of course, like, there's certain things that can, like, change mood and change and help regulate the nervous system. Um, I think that, to me, it's like, you gotta do it all. So it's like, yeah, okay, you upgraded the light, but now that's actually highlighted that, okay, I feel so much better with the lighting, but this furniture is uncomfortable, right? Or, this doesn't, like, the placement of the furniture doesn't actually let me interact with the space in the way that I want. So there are definitely, like, little elements of design I think we can all, like, do quick upgrades to, as you're saying. But I think for us, it's kind of really auditing your entire experience and then looking at the low-hanging fruit. What are those small things I can make immediate changes to now? And then what are, like, those bigger changes? Like, how do I want to feel in this space? I feel like that's, like, a really interesting abstract question to ask yourself in your own space, but as a practitioner, it's like, what are the feelings that I want to elicit for myself as a clinician or as for the client? And then really starting to look at how different elements of the design and the design as it relates to your systems, your technology, where are those, like, friction points and how can I change that? So, I mean, I it would be so hard for me to be like, yeah, it's the paint, like, just change the paint. But, like, it's unfortunately for me, it's not just, like, one thing.
Yeah, I think it is a jigsaw puzzle a little bit, and I don't mean to make that feel inaccessible for people who are looking for, like, what's a quick tip or something I can change. I think what we're trying to create is, like, a mindset shift to think of your space as a reflection of your brand. And when you walk in, do you feel like this mirrors what you want your brand to say? And sometimes it can be as simple as that. Like, it's just the lighting that's off or it's just the paint color, but often it's triaging
right.
the whole thing.
Right. It's like there can be a glaring issue, but they will still all
Yeah.
fall in line
If I
and
can
have to
pull
be
in
fixed.
a PT example, it's like if someone comes in knee pain, you're not just looking at their knee. You're looking at their hip and their low back and their ankle because rarely is it that simple. And we want people to see design with a little bit more depth than just like, tell me a paint color. Tell me,
I'm so sorry. That's my bad.
No,
No,
but
no, no.
no. But
It's a great question.
like, and even just having that mindset of even caring about the physical environment you're in and realizing that that can have an emotional impact, a really physiological impact on how you feel and your wellness. I think just the intention to even care about those things is a lot more valuable than I think we typically talk about it as.
I don't know why your answers made me nervous. I'm like, dude, they're so cool. Okay, don't mess this up. um, I am curious if we can deconstruct what a vibe is, because you alluded to how does it make your central nervous system feel. What else do you think is important in crafting a good vibe?
I think a vibe is thinking through all the senses. And I think if I had to pinpoint what people get wrong, is they just think of one. They think of just visually. Like people walk in, what do they see? What color am I doing on the walls? And that's kind of where they leave it. I think it's really thinking of it as a full sensory experience. So when someone walks in, like, am I trying to upregulate the nervous system? Like, am I a gym and I want like to bring in these high energy athletes and we're pumping
Yeah,
jams?
rave lights.
Yeah, like, is that the vibe? Right? So that conjures up a specific image. Or do I have people who are like stressed out and running on cortisol, and I want them to come in and they immediately take a deep breath? And that is all done through layers and texture, and visuals is one, texture, feel of things, smell, sound, all of that. Like part of our intake form is like, what music do you play in your space? That is part of the experience. Um, that is part of the touch point. And so all of that comes together to create a vibe. And I think all of us can think of our favorite places we like to visit, whether it's a museum or a coffee shop or a restaurant. And we go there probably because their product is good, but it's the vibe that brings us back.
Right. That is really interesting because it reminds me of I went to this cathedral in Antwerp in Belgium, and that was the thing I took away is that it captured all of your senses. And the vibe there, I think, is they're trying to impart awe, right? Where they have these, tall ceilings, flying buttresses, so you just see how big everything is, and then you hear the echoes, you hear the music, you smell the frankincense, and everywhere you're walking, there's art on each tile or writing on each tile, so you can't escape anything except for God.
Yeah.
And you just can't help but feel like, of course, this is truth or whatever.
I think that's such a brilliant example. And I think you explaining that, it conjures up something for us.
The
Versus if you say,
frankincense, I was like, "Oh,
walk
yeah."
into a church. And I
Yeah.
think that's the same thing we're trying to create for our clients, or even if they're not a client of ours, for clinic owners to think of. And the easiest way for them to do that is think of their favorite places that they like to go or where that comes to mind. How do I emulate that in my own way, in my own voice?
Fast. So what are some of those places for you? Where are those favorite places that you're drawing your inspiration from?
I love there's, like, a couple of cool restaurants in our city that I really love, and it's such a melding of all of those senses that I love. Like, number 1, I love that the process is seamless. I love that, like, every possibility has been anticipated by the staff. So, like, I don't have to ask, like, "Where do I put my purse?" Suddenly, there's, like, this really cool little stool that's been slid in. Yeah, or the hook, and I don't have to think about anything. All of the possibilities have been anticipated. Lighting and smells and even just what the staff are wearing. I was at this restaurant recently and I was like, this is so cool. Like they're all wearing this like mustard, like looks like a Diane von Furstenberg wrap dress. And I'm like, this is such a cool vibe. And it's just that consistency in the space. But I think like the reason why those places resonate with me, especially restaurants, is because it's just really celebrating all of the senses. And yeah, I think that that's really just creates like such a visceral response.
I think a way to put it is you are creating an experience, whether it's intentional or not. So is it the right one? And so it's kind of removing yourself from your own bubble a little bit and experiencing your space through new eyes and being like, what is this experience that I've created and is it the correct one? And I think hopefully that feels a little more tangible for people to make some fairly simple changes that have lasting impact, right? You don't have to like completely tear down and start fresh your space. It's like what are some things I can do to maybe enhance this experience that we've maybe lost or kind of missed the boat on?
We were just obsessed with the hotel we just stayed
Oh,
at here.
yeah.
Like,
Which hotel was that?
absolutely the Treehouse
Okay.
in Silicon Valley. It was like every detail, and it was like staying in a fun little cabin, and every corner was intentionally designed. It was really beautiful, and I think it was something outside of the box. There was a little bit of whimsy. It kind of told you that, okay, the people who are running this place or owning this place, like, are playful. It gives you, like, a sense of their personality, and it's almost like a personal connection without actual human interaction, and I think that's something that really, inspires us.
Yeah, that is a huge part of what we do that maybe I'm going off the question here, but I think clinic owners are so afraid to infuse personality, like it won't be perceived as professional. It's almost like they're just following some unknown script that's been written by some unknown person of like a clinic is supposed to be um kind of sterile, and we put up anatomy posters or like educational posters, and everyone's kind of afraid to veer from that. But we're in the business of connection. Whether you're a surgeon, whether you're a PT, whether you're a family physician, like whomever it is that we're speaking to, like the transaction here is human connection. And your space can create that connection before you even meet. And that really changes the interaction. And we really encourage people to like bring more personality into their space.
And it sounds like you're also just helping these different practices and owners ground themselves in reality again. I think a lot of the times, they're chasing after their own tail. They're, bogged down in admin stuff. It's like you can come back to earth and connect with people because ultimately that's what it's all about, right?
Yeah, and we've always taken a clinician-centered approach to our design because it's really like it's the clinicians that are creating the success of these practices, right? And we really want to create inspiring places for these like caregivers to continuously give to their clients. And so really making sure that we are creating inspiring spaces for them that, maybe consider, little things that actually go a long way, like, are there designated places for my clinicians to eat or decompress or even just store their stuff, right? How is their flow through the space making their day-to-day easier? What tech are they using that allows them to have a little more space between clients or, less just brain fatigue and, maybe more time that they can actually look their patients in the eye and have a conversation because they know there's like an AI kind of taking notes for them. I think that that is a huge part or cornerstone of our design philosophy is designing for the clinicians.
Right. And I think something that I've heard a lot. We'll just kind of bring this back into tech. Is with AI now, it's so much easier to code things, and you see this convergence of everything kind of being the same and just as good. Like you can code something with AI that's going to be roughly the same as what I'm doing, but people say what the difference is going to be moving forward is taste. It's kind of a running meme at this point in Silicon Valley because, I mean, if I'm being honest, do engineers really have taste like that? But I think taste really is just having ongoing experiences as a human, being interested in things. And so my point here is, or question is, how do you guys go about kind of developing and keeping your taste? Are you traveling? What are you interested in reading, listening to? What do you folks do?
Like all of those things. Yeah, like Meg and I love travel. We are constantly either reading books or listening to books. I like to live in the world of like fiction, sci-fi, fantasy. You like to learn things on your spare time.
I think we're also just like observers, right? I think it's like we're curious human beings by nature and we just notice everything. Like, we just take it in. I take for granted, I think everybody does that, and then I'll leave somewhere and be like, "Did you notice this? You notice that? You notice this thing?"
Yeah.
That's probably why we do design. But I think you're right in that the further we get down the road with, like, more and more technology and AI, the greater the demand for this human-centered in approach, right? And I think that's where, speaking to last point of the more we involve technology in our lives and in our spaces and in our clinical practices, the space is an amazing vehicle to balance that. And that's why we wanna bring more creativity, more personality, more texture, more of a vibe to a space, because that's the antidote, right? You take a really sterile space and then you add more and more tech, we get further and further away from connection.
I love when you brought up curiosity. I think, like, curiosity is what, you know, inspires creativity. I think once you stop being curious, you're not open-minded anymore. I think, like, getting out of your own echo chamber and really listening to other points of view, and I think that's kind of what travel forces you to do, right? Like, you're out of your comfort zone, you are out of your normal routine, and then you have to kind of get curious about, like, how are other people living their lives? What are other people eating? Like, how are they eating at 10 p.m. here? Like, what doors does that open for me? And I really do think that, like, keeping curious is what's going to keep human interaction healthy and peaceful. It's gonna create ongoing innovation. I think, like, as long as you're kind of piquing your curiosity in different ways, I think that that is, really where all of, like, the good stuff lies. So I like that you use that word.
And I would say in today's age, just noticing is a bit of a skill because you can be underwater with all of your work, but also, when I'm taking my, 15-minute break, whatever it is, I'm just on TikTok. I'm not noticing anything. You told me what I was watching 2 seconds ago, can tell you.
Yeah, no, it's so true, and I think that, like, we almost have to be intentional now to, like, just stop and, like, observe and just be, and even, when we landed and we're like, "Okay, like, what do we gotta do next?" It's like, "Wait a minute, like, look, we're on the other
Yeah.
side of
But
the continent."
a great space does that.
Did
Like,
you fly into SFO?
I bet you when you were in that church in Antwerp were not on TikTok. Like, the space commanded your attention. It broke through that noise, and that's what we intend to do. I mean, to bring it back to
And I
some,
couldn't
like,
help it either.
examples, I mean, we did a clinic where their whole reception is a library. So you walk in and it's meant to be like a book share. Some people may say, like, What's that doing in a clinic?" Well, why not? And it sparks conversation. It all of a sudden connects you with the space. We have another spot that they don't have a front desk and they have a smoothie bar. And you saddle up at a stool and you check in digitally, but they have a lovely person who will make you a coffee or a smoothie, and it's, like, meant to, again, build connection. This idea that, like, use this space to get people's attention, I think is really powerful.
Going back into actually working with these practices and the practice owners, I'm curious about some of the challenges that you actually have in those working relationships. Is there any difficulty in trying to get them to change how they've been doing things, or really what are the main issues that you see in trying to kind of get them over the hump?
I think, like, that's the biggest difficulty is as much as people know that, like, they need to think out of the box and that an evolution is necessary for their practice, um, really making those changes can be very difficult for people, right? So if they've been running a practice in a certain way and now things need to evolve in terms of tech or the different types of practitioners they're bringing in, it can be so uncomfortable for our clients, and so that is really difficult, in terms of, like, continuously encouraging them, to take some risks because everybody is coming from a background where they're science minded. Maybe they have no background in business. This is probably for some the biggest financial investment they've ever made in their lives. And so they don't want to make mistakes. And so thinking outside the box can be like very comfortable or uncomfortable. And so like that's our job, is to kind of show them visuals, show them what's possible, keep them on track, keep them trusting the process. Like the amount of times we've been like, you just got to trust the process. Like, that happens a lot. But I think that is definitely one of our major challenges.
I would agree. I think it's just walking people through that change management. But I think everyone's come to the other side and been like really
So
fulfilled.
happy about it. Yeah. And I think maybe one other area where can be challenging is just staying decisive. Like one thing we're good at, and I think that's why, this has been a successful endeavor, is that we are looking like 10 steps down the road. So it's like when we're talking about a reception desk, we're thinking about the flow around it, the tech used with it. How is there a human interaction happening there? Like we're seeing the forest through the trees, and that is really difficult for our clients to do sometimes. And understanding that like one decision can affect, 10 decisions down the road. And so kind of keeping them and trying to show them visuals to help them see some of that, that's also a challenge that I think we face.
I'm also curious to hear about your working relationship with each other. I can already tell both of you are very zen, but also just very thoughtful in how you answer questions, but also how you seem to be navigating who's answering what when and giving each other space. There's like a
We've done
psychic
this
connection
before.
there.
No,
Yeah.
we would both just talk over each other because we love chatting. We have so many similarities that are a bit spooky that we only realize later in life. However, I'd say our strengths are like equal and opposite, which is just we happened upon that. We didn't plan for that or have any real great conversations around like, I'm good at this. What are you good at? It just sort of worked itself out, and we've created a workflow that works for us. And, where my brain doesn't compute things as well, Nina does, and vice versa. So, it's been a great marriage of our skill sets for sure.
I think like our passions are very, very aligned. I think our upbringing and like we were both athletes growing up. I think like that also, like when you play high performance sports, like you can take criticism, you can take like a direct approach to communication. I think that really serves us in terms of how we communicate with each other. And then like recognizing when someone's on a high and someone's on a low and just trying to kind of like match those vibrations, I think. And I think that our brains work, as you said, like equal and oppositely in a very unintentional way. But some of those fundamental values and core principles that we have for our lives and our business are very much aligned. And I think that's why we work really well together.
That's amazing. I was just reminded of there's that like Picasso quote where he says, art critics will talk about form and structure and meaning. Artists will talk about where to buy the cheapest turpentine. What is that like for you? What is your cheapest turpentine?
I think what's hard for us is I think we see this is such an inevitability, and we can see 10 years from now. I really do believe, and I think we feel so wholeheartedly in what this whole industry, and I mean like rehab and beyond, medical, all of it is under a massive amount of change in all markets. And I think we really feel so optimistic of where it is going and how it's going to play such a crucial role, the population at large. And I think it's just like, how do we share that message with the masses that in a world where we're often spreading doom and gloom and, this is what's so terrible and this is what's so difficult.
There's no
I
more
think
turpentine.
I think we are just like we feel the opposite. We're like, sky's the limit here in terms of opportunity if it's seized appropriately. And here's our like really small, piece of the pie and where we can contribute, but it excites us and it fuels us daily. It truly does. And so I think that makes us giddy, and we wish everyone could kind of see it that way.
I think, like, just the human interaction part of it is, like, that's, like, that key component, simplest component is just, like, "I wanna hear about your business. Tell me everything. Tell me what inspires you." Like, I just wanna have that conversation with all of our clients. Like, I'm so personally invested in all of their success that, like, I think that's, like, that main component that always, like, I love coming back to is just, like, I wanna learn about you, and I want to see where we can help you
We have a very
succeed.
hard time saying no. Every discovery call we take, we're like, okay, so they were such an amazing human. We need to make this work. Even when there's 50 red flags, like that it's maybe not the right match, but it really excites us. It brings us a lot of joy.
Well, I will say it to your point of what you were saying. Sometimes it's just a crabs in a barrel mentality. People just think it's doom and gloom and nothing's going to get better. I'll talk to some clinicians. I say, what would what words of inspiration do you have? And they say, don't do it. But it sounds like you guys are saying, no, keep going. It's only going to get better.
I believe that wholeheartedly. I think we're getting a lot of things wrong. I see how important the work that we do as a collective body of practitioners is, and that's not going anywhere. In the landscape of like AI doom and gloom, we are in a human connection business.
That's just it, and it's like filling the battery to be able to continuously do the work is, I think, where we may be getting it wrong in certain environments. That's what we're trying to change is, like, how can we recharge that battery for clinicians so that they are feeling continuously gratified. They are feeling like they have more to give and they're excited to go to work and see their patients. Part of that is, like, really honing in on the kind of patients you are meant to see that you work best with, and that's comes from understanding your business.
Yeah, don't get your chairs at Home Depot.
Well, amazing. Meg, Nina, thank you so much for joining us today. Is there anything that you want to plug?
Oh, yeah, you can find us on Instagram. We do a pretty shoddy job at anything on there, but there is some of our projects you could see. It's at Articulate Design Co. And you could see our projects profiled on our website, which is articulatedesignco.com. And there's links to our portfolio there, and yeah. Thanks, Manish.
Amazing.
Yeah.
Thank you so much.